So, as I say, we've got Anne-Marie Veale, who is the nursing manager in Pangrove Daycare Centre, and we've got Marie, and we were going to have a carer, a person who was in a caring situation. Her husband had Alzheimer's, but unfortunately he passed away last week, and she can't be here. So if we are people who find themselves in a caring situation, looking after a loved one with Alzheimer's or dementia, and you want to make a response to the film in the course of the discussion, we'd love to hear that, and love to hear your personal response to that. So, Marie I work in the field of, I suppose, arts and health, where the world of art meets the world of health, and you've been working in that field for a few years now. I don't know if you fell into it or not. And so I know your work in terms of, some of you may have seen an exhibition called Anamnesis that was in the Lady Lane Library a couple of years ago about pregnancy loss and infant loss. And it was a very, very moving exhibition that was produced in collaboration with mothers who had experienced infant loss. And now you're looking at the topic of dementia, and they're not unrelated, in your view. But how did you and Kevin come to this topic?
The Alzheimer Society of Ireland invited Kevin and myself in to do a short project in Cork, and it was going to be maybe 6 weeks long, and it was based on previous work Kevin had done and I'd done separately. So we kind of didn't go in together, we went in as separate practitioners. Okay. Myself doing visual work and Kevin doing music. And to be honest, we just saw amazing potential in terms of this whole, I suppose, unknown world of dementia and what it meant for the individual and the family members and ourselves working with people. And we just found it fascinating. And I suppose we felt we just scratched the surface in the 6-week project in Cork, and felt we'd love to make a work about it in some way, to somehow help us understand the condition of a dementia. We'd make an artwork about it. So I suppose that's how we started.
And for you, what was fascinating about it for you?
I suppose for me it's like a grey world that people and I'm just talking in layperson terms, but people seem to kind of slip in and out of two worlds, the world of the everyday and then the world that was, for me, in another place and time, and moved between the two effortlessly. And I found that really interesting. I'd been reading about, there's a theorist called Pauline Boss, which some people might have come across, who talks about ambiguous loss and this sense of the ambiguity of loss, that the person's still there with you, but they might cognitively be somewhere else. And then there might be times when they snap and they're with you, and there's this magic moment of connection, and then they've slipped, and maybe you've slipped as well. So I suppose this idea of not colliding worlds, but worlds shifting, I found fascinating. I thought, well, I'm not great at talking. How might an artwork explain that somehow?
And express it, yeah. And interestingly, that the lady that's speaking in the mirror is not an actress, in case you're wondering. She's one with, and she says, it's not you, it's me, it's not me, it's you. So she almost expresses that two sides of the coin phenomenon that seems to be going on. So you made the work. You obviously got the funding to make the work, and then you decided to tour it around Ireland, and in this fabulous cinema, which I've never been in before. Why and what has that brought to you and to the work, do you think?
When we made the work, we made it in Cork, in the city and the county where Kevin and myself are based, where the initial partnership stemmed from. And we showed it in Cork in 2 galleries, and it went. The feedback was very, very positive. And I suppose, because as you mentioned, I'd toured a previous work and I'd found that fascinating, to actually tour a work. I had learnt a lot more about myself and about the work, and I saw potential to tour. E.gress and other people had said they hadn't managed to see it in Cork and they kind of wanted to see it, and I spoke to Kevin and I said, would you be interested in touring it? And I spoke to the Alzheimer Society and said, are you interested in partnering if we can look at getting funding to tour? and everyone was open and interested and saw potential. So I applied for funding and put together, I suppose, a team of both funders and partners that could in some way assist, because I'm one artist, you know. And I think what I'd learned from the earlier tour was having little events like this where we can actually hear other people's thoughts and share some of our thoughts are quite important for the work. So that was part of it, to not only show it, but also to have a chance to talk about the work and about dementia as well. So I suppose to answer your question, partly it was ambition for the work in terms of other people seeing it. Yeah. And it being, Cork's a small place, the country's much bigger than Cork, so to get it out into the country, and a tour's ideal for that in terms of, you know, we're here in Waterford, the work's then up in Sligo, you know, then it goes down to Kilkenny, so to reach people in different parts of the country. And also for me to find out more about the work and people's opinion. And if that
and it's interesting, isn't it, when work is made in a particular place based on a particular set of relationships, there's a kind of local loyalty to it. People come along, support it just because they know you and they like you. But once it leaves that place, you know, it's like Waterford goes and plays somewhere else, and then there isn't necessarily the, you know, people are coming to it quite cold actually, and there isn't necessarily that personal loyalty to the work, but there is their own personal experience, and more people are having personal experience of dementia and Alzheimer's. Now, I don't know if I'm saying that because I'm getting older, and therefore, you know, my friends' parents are getting older and so on. So I'm now entering that twilight zone, if you like, or whether it's a case that dementia and Alzheimer's is so dramatically on the increase with the aging population.
I think it's twofold. I think we have an aging population, and dementia is predominantly a condition of older people. Yeah. As well as that, I think dementia is coming out of the shadows. For years and years, we didn't know people had a diagnosis of dementia. Right. People didn't get their diagnosis. People weren't told they had dementia. Right. And when they were told, people didn't admit it to other people. Right. Okay. Whereas I think now it's coming out of the shadows. It's an acceptable condition to have. Okay. We're a lot more, as a community, even with, say, the likes of, say, Dungarvan town is becoming one of the first dementia-friendly towns in Ireland, where they are training people in shops, in post offices, in banks, to maybe recognise and help when people are showing signs that they're not managing quite as well with their day-to-day things, and help people to do their shopping and help people to do their banking, things like that. Yeah. So it's becoming a more acceptable condition to have. Okay. There are about 48,000 people in Ireland at present diagnosed with dementia. People are being diagnosed at a rate of 11 people a day.
My God.
Which is quite, and they reckon that with our population ageing, that by 2041 there will be 3 times as many people diagnosed, because people will be living longer.
Right. That's a huge statistic. So what are the care circumstances that people with dementia and Alzheimer's are finding themselves in now?
I think some of the biggest problems maybe for carers and people with dementia are, you're given a diagnosis and off you go. And you don't know enough, have any information about the condition and how it can actually present, or you don't have information on how you find that information. Now, I suppose we're lucky here in Waterford in that we have a very good care of the aged clinics. We have a very good system in Waterford, in Waterford Hospital, where we have excellent professors. We have a care of the aged clinic where people are followed through, and they give out huge amounts of information. But in some places, and I've talked to a lot of people, and they didn't really know what dementia was when they were told they had dementia. Right. And they didn't know how that would present, and there's no way of knowing how that presents, because every single person is different. Mm-hmm. And it depends on the type of dementia you have, it depends on your personality, it depends on where in your brain the damage has been done, because that affects how it presents in you. So for example, if the damage is done in the area of your brain that processes language and speech, you may find that you lose your ability to communicate very quickly. Although you know in your mind what you want to say, you can't get the words out, or it takes a long time for you to decipher the words that are coming from someone else into something you can figure out and work with. You know, so I think that's the first thing. It's knowledge and lack of knowledge are big things, and then it's where to go.
Yeah,
where to go. And unfortunately, at the moment, a lot of, say, care that comes from the HSE and things like that, and they do fantastic work, and I'm not saying, is that it's based around tasks and physical need. So if you need someone to go in and help you have a shower, you will get someone to help you have a shower. But a lot of people with dementia that's not what they need. They need someone to be there with them for a couple of hours in the day, for a social structure, and to allow whoever's caring for them to go out and do their bits and bobs that they want to do, and maybe go to an art class, maybe go for some yoga, maybe go for a run. But that's, at the moment, I suppose, financially constrained with the way things are at the moment. So I think a lot of the times it's, where do I go? Where can I find people who can help with that? And there's actually a lot of organisations out there, but we don't know about it. There's befriending services, there's the Alzheimer Society, there's Carers Association, there's a lot of groups that actually can help, but people don't know where to access the information and to access where these groups are in your local community.
Because Mary and I went to meet you in planning this, and what I took away from that was that your centre caters for people, mostly older people with Alzheimer's and dementia, but equally, whether that's part of your job description or not, you're giving support to the families and carers as well.
It's just I suppose we see, although our primary remit is people with dementia, and to come, say, to our daycare centre, you must have a diagnosis of dementia. But to us, these are people. Yeah. They're not people with dementia, they're people. They're people who have a life story, who have loved ones, who have family, and very few people in the world are completely isolated from anyone. And people are coming in every morning with their family members, so of course you have a chat, of course you have a link with them and a support, and I think maybe we as Irish people don't ask for help as early or as readily as we should. I think sometimes we wait until things have hit a rock and a hard place. And the one thing I would hope, that if there's any carers or people with family members out there who are looking after someone with dementia, if you take from this, is to seek help early. And I don't mean just from the Alzheimer Society but from wherever you can, because when you have a support network around you, when something happens, that network is there and they just tighten up the strings and help further. But if you have no support network around you when something happens, then it can turn into a crisis very quickly, because you don't know there's nobody who knows your loved one as well as you do and is able to meet their needs, because they don't know their needs. But when they're involved with somebody, be it someone calling to the house a couple of times a week, that maybe could up that in a crisis if you're sick, or if, I think that's the one thing that's important, to try and get a link in with some service early, so that they're there through the whole journey with you.
Yes. So this film, it's in terms of films about dementia, it's not an educational tool. It's not going to tell you, hard facts, or describe the possible journey ahead or whatever. And so in that, it's a different type of language. So I'm just interested in you just saw it today for the first time, Anne-Marie, didn't you?
Yes.
Even though we had been talking about it.
Yeah.
And what bit of it resonated with you? Is there anything? And just,
I suppose maybe I look at it from a different perspective. I see a lot of people that I know in it. Yes. I see a lot of people. I can see Jimmy does that, and Billy does that, and Mary does, and those kind of things. I see silly little things, like I said, the beanie that the lady in the mirror wears, the woolly hat. My husband has the same woolly hat, and that kind of struck me straight away. And I thought, sometimes we forget, it could be me. It could be me tomorrow. Yeah. It could be my husband. It could be my mum. It could be, and I think that kind of brought it home a bit more to me.
Yeah.
Because working with something and living with something is a completely different scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think
the points of recognition or the
Yeah.
moments of recognition. And does anyone want to come forward at this stage to share anything particular that resonated with them about the film? And if not, I'll ask the question again in 10 minutes.
I suppose just the thing for me that resonates is when you have those photographs of the person when they were younger, and actually
Yes.
they still look the same.
Yes.
But it's a reminder that they were one of us. You know,
Yes.
They were young. You know, and just that human story.
And it's the same person.
And the
You know,
same
it's the
person.
same, yeah,
Absolutely.
and at the core, it's the same person. Yeah, that was very interesting. I wanted to go back to you and talk a little bit about the process, because you collaborate, okay? You collaborated with Kevin in the making of the work, but you collaborated with other people. So can you describe the different types of collaboration that led to this work? Because there's many layers to it.
Yeah. Kevin, as a musician, and myself as a visual artist, kind of collaborated all the way through. So whenever I gathered visual material, I showed them to Kevin, and he did the same with the sound. So we kind of cross-influenced each other all the way through. And I suppose the first collaboration was with the institution, I don't think that's the right word, but the organisation of the Alzheimer Society of Ireland in Cork, and the staff.
Yeah.
And we visited daycare centres in the city and the county.
Yeah.
And if we didn't have support from the staff, we were going to be nowhere.
Yeah.
So although it's kind of difficult sometimes, because you're saying we want to make an artwork, but we don't know what the end work's going to be like, because spending time with people like yourselves, people who are in the service with dementia, are going to inform the work.
Yeah.
So you're hoping the staff will trust you
Yeah.
and see something in your past work that in some way connects with them.
Yeah.
So the first collaboration was with the staff and building trust.
Yeah.
That we were both okay as people, and our approach was okay, and our intentions were honourable.
Yeah.
And then the second layer of collaboration was actually trying to connect with people who are visiting the daycare centres. So we wouldn't have met the families at the onset, because the families would have dropped people off. So it would have been working directly with people who have a dementia. And we would have spent time kind of hanging out with people, drinking tea and chatting and trying to, I suppose, blend in as much as possible with what's going on in the daycare centre and not imposing ourselves too much. And then seeing if we kind of connected with someone in the room.
Okay.
And then saying, if we did, could we possibly spend a bit of time, so say with yourself, could I spend a bit of time photographing you in another room and doing more one-to-one work, and Kevin would do the same with the recording. And that would have been over the span of a year. So a long time, dipping in and out, maybe once a week, once a fortnight, to the same settings and recording masses and masses of material.
Yeah.
And then we really, really hope to get into people's homes.
Okay.
And also into residential care. But it's too big an ask at the beginning. And so over time, we shared this with the staff who kind of knew that. And they said, well, perhaps talk to Margaret's mum, or talk to, Kieran. And so we met the families at the end of the daycare settings and had a chat. And it was funny, there's like a queue of people coming in to chat just to get a sense of who we were. And we explained that we'd like to spend time in their family home recording a little bit of their life in some way. And everyone that we asked agreed, which was brilliant. We thought perhaps people would be fearful, because it's a big step, isn't it, to let someone into your home. And then the family were involved.
Yeah.
And then it was a matter of whether people wanted to be in front of the camera or behind the camera and present on the recorder or not.
Yeah.
And most people were a little bit shy, and they said, I'd prefer to be in the background and make my mom centre stage or make my husband centre stage. Then the nursing home was the next layer, which again was about staff allowing us access. So I suppose, to answer your question, there were layers and layers of collaboration.
And I'm thinking, there's a lot of ethical questions in the course of that, because patients with dementia are the subject, the camera's on them, and how you get consent for that, or do you get consent from the family members?
I suppose we were guided by the Alzheimer Society, and asked that very question in terms of There's the legal construct of consent, and then there's the human day-to-day construct. I believe there's both sides. So we looked at both sides, and the family members signed permission for their loved ones to take part at the onset. So we did it. I've done it different ways in different projects, but in this film we invited the family members to say, would you like your family to be involved, and can you sign permission if you would like it, as opposed to showing them the film at the end. But I believe if you're working really closely with an individual, they may or may not themselves, or their family may or may not have signed consent. And I understand that's important, but I think also you need that respectful, I suppose, exchange that's about a more subtle consent and permission.
So you need to read the situation and whether that person is comfortable, because I think the filming of the woman who has dementia is even a step beyond, we'll say, the photographing. You know, it seemed even closer. You know, we heard her voice, we saw her interacting with herself. You know, and there is even that moment of discomfort. It's like because. Which is what art is, of course. And we had a conversation earlier about, and it's another ethical question, that you said that in watching this you were reflecting upon yourself and your own work, as whether we're doing the right thing.
Sometimes, you know, you, especially I suppose with people who have maybe language skill difficulties and things like that, I would love sometimes to be able to get into someone's head and see, is what I'm doing with someone having the effect I wanted to have with them? You know, is it touching them and meaning to them the same way I am envisioning it doing? You know, if I sit down and do something one-on-one, and we might be chatting, we might be laughing, but are they getting the same out of it as I feel they are? And that to me is the one thing kind of maybe strikes me. I would, and I'll never get the definitive answer, I don't think, for that. But I think if someone is happy, if their demeanour is happy, I think that's always a positive. You know, I don't think you can fake that real laugh, that real smile, that real, you know. But I just sometimes I would love to be able to see inside and see the response and the, you know, that what we're doing is the right thing, you know.
Because it's a question we all ask ourselves in different ways, and I'm interested the length of the process and the continuity, that it was you or Kevin that was important, that continue, you know, that it's the same person. And I'm going to start. Liam, I saw Liam here. Mary Grehan is here. Liam works with us in the Healing Arts Trust, and he and other musicians bring music into St Aidan's ward in Otterans. And what's interesting, Liam, is that you've said in the past that you do a music program that might be 6 or 8 or 12 weeks long, but at the end, if a certain number of weeks in, there'll be a more readiness to engage, as opposed to week 1 or 2 or 3. Which is interesting, because we often think that with Alzheimer's and dementia, it's just in the now. Everything is in the now, and there isn't this kind of, you know, building up of a relationship. But yeah.
Yeah, I remember the first time we began the programme in St Aidan's and in St Otterans, and the first 4 weeks were impossible. We just felt we weren't getting through it all with the music. And week 4, everything changed. There was this little tiny seed of recognition that when we came in with the instruments, there was a gentleman who was at a very, you know, late stage of Alzheimer's and was quite aggressive in that. But when we walked in the door on the 4th week, he looked at us and he began to sing Danny Boy, which was incredible, that on some level he had made this connection, that music, and that was his song. But it was very interesting. First of all, Mary, congratulations to yourself.
Yeah.
It's you use the term sort of grey, and certainly what struck me, apart from everything else, was the settings that we're looking at are very grey, very stark, very empty, very unstimulating for people who need a lot of stimulation, you know. And I think once you go in under the umbrella of mental health in Ireland, you tend to be pushed into a corner in terms of the health sector, and to a certain extent forgotten about. You know, were it not for the work of the likes of Waterford Healing Arts Trust and other artists working in the area of health, as I said, where I feel, and you used the term potential at the very start, you saw the potential in these people, and it's very, very important that we continue to tap into that. Just by coincidence, I'll finish. But a colleague of mine who's in Japan at the moment, Dr. Jane Bentley, she's doing a rhythm and communications tour, working with dementia patients in Japan, and she posted a lovely picture on Facebook this morning of origami figures, and I'll just read the little footnote she has with it here. It's very, very interesting. Again, just comparing the starkness of the settings.
Yeah.
And clearly, you know, they've moved forward a bit in those terms in Japan. She's a lovely photograph of some origami pieces here up on Facebook, and she says, "Fruits of this morning's origami lesson taught to me by some lovely wee ladies with dementia, living at an incredible facility that is more like a traditional Japanese family home. It certainly showed in the confidence, sense of joy, sense of life, joy and purpose in the residents, and we got on wonderfully without needing any language, just as we do in music. My heart is full." Isn't that a lovely thing?
Yeah, it's lovely.
You know?
Yeah, it's lovely.
And again, I suppose, as I said, just the initial impact of the film was the setting.
And I suppose I should defend Cork in a way, because I think to an extent that's probably the aesthetic that Kevin and myself brought to it intentionally. And I think if we were to visit the two Cork settings, because you know, in terms of it isn't Waterford, but I know Waterford has the same ambience as Cork, that it's actually really bright and full of light and joy and hope. The settings are very colourful. And I suppose for me, filming, I ended up a lot in the what I see as transition spaces of the corridors, because I felt that's what I was trying to capture in a way, this sense of transition, rather than the very sumptuous, comfortable sitting room spaces. And that was intentional for I suppose, what I was reaching for in terms of the film, this idea of transition. So they do end up quite grey. I am mindful of that. Someone mentioned it actually, another part of the tour, and John was there from Cork, and I could see him thinking, what? But it's a very good thing to talk about in terms of how it's the artwork has, I suppose, taken one idea as opposed to it being more documentary-like in terms of a representation of a venue. So it's good to talk about that.
I think it's something just that has kind of come on board in the last few years too, with caring, especially in maybe long-term care facilities and things like that, where people with dementia live. They're getting much more aware of having places more homely, and that within the restrictions they have with fire safety and all these things. But one of the interesting things that a lot of nursing home facilities that have dementia-specific wards do is now at night the staff wear pyjamas.
Yeah.
Because when someone gets up in the middle of the night and you're saying to them, "Come on, we'll go back to bed," well, why aren't you up? Why aren't you going back to bed?
Right, okay.
You know,
sensible.
and you know, which is a very logical question. You're in my home, and why aren't you going to bed? And the staff will often wear pajamas now and sit down, have a cup of tea, and say, "You go off to bed now. I'm going off to bed myself." You know,
Right, okay.
and it structures a daytime and a nighttime with the different. And staff don't wear uniforms as such as in what we envision as the clinical uniforms that we're so used to seeing people in. There's one facility in Thomastown in Kilkenny, and they have their uniforms coming from America, but they, for example, in February, I know the ward sister wears this fabulous tunic with loads of hearts on it for Valentine's Day coming up, and she has they're made specially to kind of, and they do them to kind of bring around the seasons and the time of the year and things like that, and bring that in and reorientate people. But they don't wear the kind of uniforms that we envision a nurse and a carer and that, because this is someone's home. And this is the last thing we want to create is a them and us atmosphere.
And it's really interesting how messages get communicated. There's what you say, and then there's what you do and what you show and what you what you live out. And the building communicates messages, the people communicate messages, and so that people. Dementia and all of us are reading messages on all those levels. So it's to make sure all the messages are coherent with each other. Yeah. And what's interesting about film that I took away is the discordancy of the music, and this is discordancy, the mismatch, of things, even the images here, of how they're all just, there's one and then there's the other, and they're just a bit off. Things are a bit off, and it's very disconcerting, and it's about giving expression to that,
And I suppose the first time that Kevin, and I'm sure Kevin can't be here today, but we both have talked about this, that we might have spent time with someone who has dementia. It is a challenge. It is kind of nerve-wracking because it's about, if I talk about myself, it's about me, and if I can't connect with someone, they might not have the communication skill that I'm conventionally used to. That is unsettling, and I felt Kevin felt we had to kind of honour that in the artwork, this unknown territory in a way, and being in someone else's mind as much as in our own mind in terms of the interpretation of that.
Are there any other particular responses or questions, Anna?
I just wanted to ask two things. Why is it called E.gress?
Yes.
Because that hasn't been explained.
Yes.
And secondly was the people who were in the film, how did they respond to the film?
Yeah, maybe if I answer the second one first. We spoke about, because there was versions of the film being made, so there was kind of edit 1, edit 2, and we spoke, Kevin and myself did, to the Alzheimer Society, and we also set up a steering group, like an advisory group. So if there was an important decision to be made, we put it to, I suppose, our advisory group and said, what do you think about this? So this would be people within the HSE, people who've got experience of dementia, artists, filmmakers, so a whole range of people. What do you think about someone who's involved in the film or their family members seeing it the first cut or not? What do you think? What ended up happening was that the Alzheimer Society took a decision to say it's actually better if the family members and the individuals who are involved see the final version. Okay. They felt that perhaps from an art background, if you see something if I go into an artist studio and I see something that's 3/4 of the way there, I could kind of accept, it's a bit rough around the edges, and I can imagine it as a finished piece. And although I'm a bit kind of thinking, it's not quite there, I'd accept that, but they were saying perhaps people, that might be not very comfortable position, that to see something that's rough around the edges, it isn't fair, because you're asking their opinion on something that isn't actually finalised. So they made the decision, which they put forward the proposal, and we accepted that it would be best to show people a final work and then garner feedback at that stage. We then asked, should we show the work in people's daycare settings, or should we show it in the galleries that it was planned to be shown in publicly? What would be the best thing? And I suppose these things, there's no real right and wrong, but we took a kind of collective decision and then reflected on it. And what was decided was that the work would be shown in the gallery as best it could, and people would come along with their family members quietly themselves. We did have an occasion like this that everyone was invited to, but the families actually said, the feedback was, no, actually, we want to come and see it on our own terms quietly. And then they wrote little comments in the book, so we kind of got the feedback through the staff, but also you could recognise people's names in the book. So it was a quiet way of seeing it, because it wasn't like today, which is just today. They were on show for several weeks. People came in either just with one person, or some people came in with a big group of family. Some people came back several times. So it was a mixture. Everyone did it on their own terms, really differently. Does that answer? Try to hold. Did you?
Why was called E.gress? Yes,
We wanted a name that would prompt the question of what does that mean. So we felt the film was all about questions and having to bring yourself into the frame as a member of the public to say, well, what's this about? I don't quite get it. We felt that was important. And the word egress, it's an architectural term, so it means to enter or leave, usually a building, but it could be any space. So you say that the door there, you might enter it or leave it. So it's a point of transition. It describes the point of transition. And I think for Kevin and myself in the film, it's all about that journey and shifting and moving from one place to another. It's not about being static in one place or trapped, it's about constantly shifting. And I suppose the name E.gress describes that. It's all about a threshold, and you move over that threshold, if that answers that.
Okay. That's interesting, because we were talking about that earlier about if somebody has Alzheimer's or dementia. My father had only 5 weeks before he died, and it's not that it's one thing. It's like every day it was shifting sands, and that we were all having to adjust on a continual basis, and as such it's challenging.
Yeah, it's
everybody.
a progressive condition, and it does change, and it depends as well on what type of dementia somebody has. So if somebody has a vascular dementia and they're functioning at a certain level for a while and they have another stroke, you're naturally going to see a deterioration in their functioning ability because there's more damage done in their brain. And vascular dementia can be kind of a stairs kind of thing, where we can go along at a plateau for a while and then we can have a drop because we've had some kind of event, and we can go along the stairs and then have a drop again. Whereas a dementia such as an Alzheimer type dementia can be more kind of a slower progression, but then different things can affect things. Everything that goes on in our lives that affect us will also affect the person.
Right.
So if I spend 3 days in bed because I'm dying with the flu, that will affect me, it will affect a person with dementia. If I have a kidney infection, or if I all these things will affect the person. A death in the family, a wedding, all these things that change what's going on around us affect us. They will affect the other the person as well, because it's natural. So that can all have an effect.
You mentioned families, and I'm just wondering, I'm actually surprised you mentioned families so much, because I'm sure there's older people out there who don't have families, or whose families are quite far away and therefore wouldn't necessarily be accompanied. And how does that get managed? And not necessarily in this situation here, presumably.
It's someone who lives alone.
Yeah, and what happens to them within the context of our society and in the future as well, I suppose.
Yeah. I suppose most of the time we will always have some kind of link there will be some family member, or there will be some neighbour or somebody who they've been close to, who has always been involved with this person, It may be a niece, it may be a niece or nephew, it may be something along those lines. With the caring thing, from our point of view, from the Alzheimer Society, it doesn't make a difference as long as it's the person that is there to support you. So it doesn't matter who that person is to you, in that structure, as long as you're happy that person is there to be your support. I suppose legally in this country it's a different situation, and where you're looking at, if someone, and I suppose this is something not just for people with a dementia, this is for everyone. I'm on my mother to sort this at the moment. My mother is 73. There is a thing called an enduring power of attorney, which is something that you can do, and you have to be able to make decisions at the time. But what you do is you come along and you say, I want my nephew Billy to be in charge of my financial affairs. I want my niece Mary to be in charge of my medical decisions and care needs. And that sits there with your solicitor until a time comes where you're not capable of making decisions for yourself anymore. And then Mary and Billy go to the solicitor, and what they do is they invoke the power of attorney, and they start to take responsibility over these things for you. The problem with that is that we don't do it in this country until it's too late, or we don't know about it in this country until it's too late. And unfortunately then, at the moment, the situation is where if you have no one to make decisions for you, it often happens that you're made a ward of court, and decisions are made through the courts for your care. It's changing at the moment with the Capacity Act. It is, yeah. The Capacity Act is supposed to be here at the moment. It's being delayed with everything. Yeah. It was passed, but it hasn't actually been kind of. Yeah, it's not running as of yet. It's passed, but it isn't actually up and going at the moment. And things are all changing around that now with the Capacity Act, and the whole idea of the ward of court will be gone when the Capacity Act is up and running completely. But there's I suppose, like everything, there's a lot of education to be done around it. There's a lot of changes that are going to be made in the law, in the health services and everything around it. So it's going to take time for everyone to be up to speed with exactly how we do that. But everything is changing. But I suppose technically presently it's ward of court or enduring power of attorney if you can't make a decision for yourself, or the medics will make a decision based in your best interest a lot of the time, but hopefully once the new Capacity Act is up and running properly, things will change.
And I have a question, perhaps for the audience, is that dementia and Alzheimer's gets represented in lots of ways, in documentaries or educational videos or tools, or even by Hollywood, we'll say, in films such as E.gress. And this is a real artwork in the sense that it's got all the ambiguity of an artwork. It's in fact it's quite hard to pin down in one way. And I'm just wondering what people think. What does this give us, we'll say, in terms of an experience or an insight that we'll say the more kind of classic narrative doesn't? Do you think?
I was going to say, what is the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's?
Good question.
Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. So dementia is an umbrella term, similar to say cancer is an umbrella term, and you can have different types of cancer. So there are different types of dementia, and Alzheimer's disease is a type of dementia. With Alzheimer's disease, you get these plaques, these types of proteins that build up in your brain, and these tangles that build up along the nerve fibres of your brain and stop the messages getting through from our brain to tell us how we do things and how we function. You have things like a vascular dementia, which is caused as a result of maybe a vascular condition like having had a stroke or having had little TIAs, things like that. You have a dementia called frontotemporal dementia, which means that a lot of the damage is done in a certain part of your brain, the frontotemporal lobe, which controls certain aspects. So you see certain behaviours and manifestations with people who have that. So dementia is kind of like an umbrella term for all these different conditions. And what they all do is they cause a decrease in our functioning ability through an inability to carry out our day-to-day activities in the way we normally would,
That causes frustration and all that.
It can, for some people, yes, it can, especially in the early stages. Yeah, in the early stages it can, because if you know that you're not going to be able to do certain things, that can be very frustrating. That can be very scary, and to recognise that you no longer know how to make a cup of tea for yourself can be very, very scary.
Yeah.
Because then you go, oh my God, someone's always going to have to be here with me now, and I've seen people come around it in the strangest way. I looked after a gentleman, and he was diagnosed in his 50s with dementia, and what triggered it with his family. He was a bachelor, lived alone, had very good brothers and sisters support, but they went in one day to make him a cup of tea, and he had the tea bags in the kettle because he couldn't remember all. And there's quite a lot of steps involved in making a cup of tea. Yes. When you think about it. You need to fill the kettle. If you're like me, you need to warm the teapot. Then you need to boil the kettle again, empty the water, put in the tea bags, fill it up, maybe put it on the hob for a while. There's a lot of steps. He couldn't remember all the steps, so he bypassed it. He put the tea bags in the kettle, and he had tea on tap. There was only tea and milk to think about then. But that was how he came about, and that's one of the first signs that they noticed that there was something wrong when they went in one day to make tea. Or, why are the tea bags in the kettle? and he just made some blasé comment about it, but that twigged with them, and they started to notice other little things that were happening, that he was kind of making mistakes in his day-to-day functioning. But that's a scary thought. For me, who drinks about 40 cups of tea a day, the thought that I might be able to make that cup of tea for myself is a scary thought, so that can lead to a lot of frustration. And if your language skills are affected, to know in your head what you want to say and not be able to find the words to say it has to be a very, 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 very frustrating stage. To not be able to tell you I have a pain in my head and the noise is driving me cracked. Turn off the telly. I can't get that out, so what do? I might go out and hit the telly because I don't know how to turn off the television, you know. And this is how my way of expressing what I want to do. But it's because of what oftentimes it's to do with a fear and not being able to communicate what we want to communicate, not having the ability to do that in a way. And sometimes what we find is if you see a behaviour that maybe is maybe an aggressive behaviour, if we can trace back, sometimes you can see a common link and you can discover what the cause for it is. If you can trace back and see what we're doing right before this, what you know, if we can go backwards, you can investigate and find something. And it may be that someone maybe screams every time you get them up to walk them someplace, but maybe they have a pain in their leg and we don't know about it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just sometimes it's kind of thinking a little bit outside of what we're seeing to find out the
because everything has its own kind of logic in a way.
Yes. Yeah, and a lot of things have their own kind of logic in a way.
Yeah.
You know, but it's just when our brains are functioning in a different way, we show them in a different way.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. Anna, yeah. Okay.
The question you were asking before about what is the difference in this in comparison to documentaries. When I look at it, the whole subject of dementia, that is what comes to mind when you get in documentaries is loss and what people can't do and what has to be put in place. Whereas for me, what this does, it challenges you in what remains.
Yes.
The person, the personality, the way they walk, the way they dress, the way they look. The person still remains. There's an awful lot remaining in spite of what's lost. And I think for me that's what that does. It challenges me to look at it differently and to look at what remains.
That's great.
Thank you. So a couple of hands, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose continuing on from that point, what is the difference of this piece in comparison to maybe other films or documentaries? And for me, what I get from this, it is the nature of the collaborative process. It's not only looking at, as you said, the loss, it's looking at what I see the opposite of that as the potential. And I think from my own experience of working with people with dementia, it was that idea of expectations that was kind of almost placed upon them. And I will speak about one experience in particular, in that me walking into a day centre, I was kind of pre-warned, I suppose, by staff about a particular person that was there, and they said, she has dementia, she won't remember you, and don't be upset when that happens. And I think it was from a place of care that they did say it. But similar to your story, maybe week 4 or 5, myself and 2 of my colleagues walked in to do our usual session on Monday morning, and she said, oh, the 3 girls are back. I bet you they're going to do art with us. They must love us. I bet you that's why they keep coming back. And I was like, do you know what? I think you're right. But it was amazing to see that where that person had been placed in a kind of box.
Yeah.
And she totally transcended that.
Yeah.
You know, by showing the human side of this person. She knew who we were. She knew why we were there, and she seemed to express a certain joy of us being there, and we certainly had a lot of joy of being there ourselves. And I think with a piece like this, it really highlights that, the potential, you know, as you said, rather than looking at the loss, looking at the potential of the people, that human contact.
Can I just say that's something that I totally agree with, because we get caught up sometimes in normal day with knowing people by their name, knowing people by their... If someone knows that they're safe with you, that can be enough.
Yeah.
You know? And I have clients like that who technically shouldn't know who I am, technically shouldn't know I actually have curly hair. And I went into work one day and I don't do the makeup, I don't do my hair could be standing on top of my head when I go into work a lot of days. But one day I was coming to something like this in the afternoon and I had done the hair and done the makeup. And one of the clients who speaks very little came out and looked at me and went, yeah, it's different. This is nice. He knew straight away there was something different.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's all that's a huge recognition. For me, that was a huge recognition. You know, and we get caught up with knowing specifics and names and things like that.
Yeah.
We don't need to know that. We need to know that someone is safe and content and happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a huge thing.
Yeah. And I saw another hand, but we'll go back to Teresa. The hand maybe has gone. But yeah. Sorry, Liam. I'll go. Teresa and
I
mainly.
just wanted to say in response to your question that I think what the film also shows is a common humanity and the fragility of the humankind. I could see a lot of Francis Bacon in it somewhere, deliberately or not, but he painted that very much, that the uncanniness of the human mind and that magical element, that there are these unexpected moments where somebody who's technically has this diagnosis, then comes out with this wonderful surprise, and so I think that's quite well reflected in this movie, and so it brings us in, and at the end of the day, maybe they have Alzheimer, but there are people. We could be there soon ourselves.
They're people. They're people just the same as everyone else.
Kevin and myself used to speak about 2 and 2 makes 5, and that's what we were desperately trying for in points when the sound and the visual, something would happen. You've kind of reminded me of it in terms of what you just said there. It shifts into just something a bit magical. I don't use that word lightly, but just that sense of another aspect. 2 and 2 makes 5, which I think you're touching on a little there.
Something inexplicable, maybe, or
yeah, maybe inexplicable is a good way of describing it. Yeah.
Liam, and then we're going to wrap this.
The potential, and just in your own work, Marie, would you have 1 or 2 examples where you sort of found the potential, like you've got something, working with somebody for a year, and from day 1 to day 52 or whatever, the extraordinary or a little leap or something that they would have achieved that would be surprising given their diagnosed condition. Have you an example of something?
Yeah, I get asked a fair bit, and it's a very valid question, but I never go there in terms of describing that, and I've had to really think deep about why I don't, because it has happened and things have, and I might ask a member of staff because I wouldn't really know, and they'd say exactly like what you're describing there. But I suppose I'm trying really hard to for me it's like a tightrope of wanting to honour that collaboration and what the potential is for that person, but I don't want to hold that, I don't want to claim that, I don't want to own it, I can't. So I try and hold myself very firmly in the artwork and the potential for that. So I kind of know something's happening there, and I've kind of, I've kind of got a background in community development and arts facilitation and teaching as well as my artwork, but I see that as all underpinning my priority of making art. And so I hold on tightly to that, even though I do know other things are happening. They are, but I'm very loath to talk about it, really, in a way.
You do feel that you make a connection.
Yeah.
And that there is something.
But I feel I have to own that through the artwork. I suppose I have to prioritise that bit of unexpectedness, or whatever that word is. That connection has to be manifest publicly in the artwork, and I see things happening because I work quite intimately, often in one-to-one, and amazing things happen. And it really frustrates me because 9 times out of 10, no one else can see that. And so I have to tackle that myself in terms of why isn't that enough for me? And I suppose if I'm honest, I'm saying it's not enough. If I'm totally honest, because I'm an artist and it has to somehow be manifest in an artwork. But the process, because it could take, like you're saying, a year's collaboration, that's what sustains it. That's what makes me hold on and know the potential for the 2 or 10 or 100 or whatever it is, what you're describing. But then afterwards I kind of retreat from that. I've done a long-term collaboration with an art therapist, and so I suppose between the two of us we've looked long and deeply about the differences of our practice and the difference of our priorities. So there's a lot there, but I don't tend to claim it. Hopefully I've explained that without sounding like I'm copying out. I suppose I would look to someone like Anne-Marie to then be saying, can she, and I'm not saying you know, but can a healthcare professional name and claim that?
Yeah.
That I am part of, but that the healthcare profession holds it. I suppose that in my practice, that's my interest in terms of it's named in some way more, not necessarily clinically, but within a health frame.
I don't know how I want to word what I'm thinking in my mind, but I suppose what I'm thinking is that sometimes we think that because someone has a diagnosis of a dementia, we limit them. But they don't have to be limited. They can learn so much. They have so much to offer. I started working in Pine Grove about 2 years ago. The amount of things I have learned from the people that come in to use our centre is unbelievable. I have learned about art, I have learned about history, I have learned about religion, I have learned about different aspects of different jobs, science, you name it, I have learned it every day from the people I work with, who are all people who have a dementia. But we shouldn't limit people just because we don't limit people because they have a diagnosis of cancer. Okay, there are certain things we may not be able to do. And if I have a certain type of cancer, I may not be able to do certain things because of it. Okay. And the same if I have a certain type of dementia, my short-term memory may not be very good, and I may live a little more in the moment. But if I enjoy that moment, I enjoy that moment, and that will have a lasting effect on me for the day. And if I feel safe and comfortable and enjoy what's going on, you will get the best out of me. The same as if I walk into a room and feel comfortable and liked, you'll get the best out of me then. You know, there's no difference in us in that way. And you know, I don't know what I'm trying to say really.
No, I think you said it. I think you said it, absolutely.
That's what's nice about the film is it's not actually making these people into others. They are,
they're us.
Like us. Yeah. So because a documentary would sort of like just sort of put them on a pedestal or sort of distance them and give them a label.
Do you want to say that?
Yeah, I suppose I'm just saying the same thing and trying to express it in other words. You know, it's a response to the film, but it's a life experience that draws me to the film, and feeling that the film describes experiences I've had. And I've seen the film, I don't know how many times now, and each time I see it, I'll be very honest, my mother was one of 8 girls, and 6 of her sisters had different forms of dementia. So we lived with dementia in our extended family for a very long time. And you know, what Anne-Marie is saying, I think so beautifully, is, you know, we don't change. We are the same person. Things happen to us. Life happens around us. And in some ways, you know, and we are living until we finally die. So every moment is, you were talking about the potential. There's a potential for learning. And what I love about the film is it is really complex and it is really blurry. And you know, those layers and layers and layers are almost like an archaeological dig. You know, we have to dig and clean away the layers to get to the essence of the person, which I think at the end of the day, from birth to death, is what we're trying to do all the time. And I think it's also about communication, because unfortunately when somebody is diagnosed with any illness, and you've used cancer as a comparator, and I think what happens to us as the person maybe who really loves the other person is that we immediately identify with our own loss, and we maybe transfer that sense of loss onto the other person, and what we see as the other person is losing, but really reflecting back is what are we losing. And the opening sequence of your film is so beautiful when the man is talking about not remembering the name, but there's a laughter because the other woman doesn't remember, and there's that lovely dialogue for the moment where, but we're both here and we're communicating. We can't either of us remember the name, but we're actually connecting really deeply. So I think the film works in such a multi-layered way. I'd say it reveals itself every time and reveals something else about my experience every time I see it. So congratulations.
Can I just say, when you talk about the loss and there is a term that is used around dementia, which is ambiguous grief, and it's about, we grieve for the loss of certain aspects of the person. So maybe it's a husband whose wife has looked after him all his life and has always done the cooking and has always done the housework and has always done everything, and suddenly he's there and he doesn't know how to cook anymore, and he doesn't know how to turn on the washing machine, and he doesn't know how to iron the clothes, or vice versa, or lots of different situations. And we grieve the loss of the person, maybe that we bounced all those ideas off, all those things when something came in and we didn't know how to do it. We talk, we all do, and you bounced around, you figured it out with your partner or if you're like me, and I'm a nurse, and the minute my child sniffles, I run to my mammy and I say, what do you think? And if you weren't able to do that, you grieve the loss of that aspect of your relationship, and you feel guilty nearly for grieving that. But that's okay. We can do that because maybe that aspect of your relationship is gone, and we're allowed to be angry over that, and we have to acknowledge that we have lost a certain something in the dynamic and the relationship, and maybe we've lost certain aspects of the person. And I think as soon as we allow ourselves to acknowledge that and deal with that, we can actually move forward in a better way, and see, and it can be very hard to acknowledge because you can feel robbed of certain things that you were going to do together, or certain, but I think when we can acknowledge that and deal with it, and it's hard to deal with, we can actually move forward in a more positive way. Does that make sense?
Thank you everybody for your generosity and open-heartedness in coming to today's discussion and entering into it so fully. Thank you to Mary. I've known Mary many years. She works so extraordinarily hard in not just in terms of producing the work and considering every question, you picked up on that today, considering every question at every stage and negotiating that, but then honouring the work and the relationships she built up by touring it, by documenting it, by sharing it, and there's incredible generosity there. I did wonder when I came today, why is Mary putting this in a mobile cinema as opposed to the local art centre, for example? And now that I'm here in this almost cocoon of a space, divorced from any particular time or space, it's such a particular experience that I'm glad you did it. It's such a special experience. So thank you. You'll be here till 6. The film will be here till 6.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Thank you. Any comments before?
Yes, to fill out the book. Yeah.
I was just saying to Mary there, like perhaps if some people have things that they'd like to share with either Kevin or myself or the Alzheimer Society, Mary as well doing a lovely job here chairing, just to jot a note in the little books. They're really valuable to us in terms of we go away and then reflect on things people have said, So
and you'll be here to continue the conversation if people want to do it on a one-to-one.
I will go and get a sandwich because I'm feeling
shaky. I know.
But the person that's working with me, Nick, will be here as well. So and it finishes at 6, as you say. And
thanks, Anne-Marie. You were amazing on a on a professional, personal level. Just fantastic. Thank you.
Can you make me a little piece of information?
I did bring some little bits of information if anyone is looking for information about the journey through dementia, different help books, leaflets, things like that. I did bring a few if anyone wants to take them up. There's a box outside you can rifle through and see if anything is pertinent to yourselves and take them away.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Anne-Marie.